I want to take you today very far away from here, where you have pristine water, and take you to what may seem like a million miles away, to a place where very little water comes out of taps, and even if it does, you wouldn't want to drink it or even brush your teeth with it. Most of the water is of very poor quality, and some of the water is probably not as good as what runs in our sewers. I wanted to talk to you about some shrinking lakes in Africa, and I can tell you I've seen them. But there's one statement, an old African saying, as the water hole gets smaller, the animals get meaner. And I hope that we don't get to test that theory in this part of the world, because it's already happening in other parts. I think Maud gave you this statistic, but this is a graphic of it. Unsafe water kills more children in the world than malaria, war, and HIV/AIDS combined. Now, how important is safe water? 2 million children under the age of 5 die each year for lack of clean drinking water. That's 1 every 8 seconds. And this is a statistic that a lot aren't aware of. 4 billion annual cases of diarrhea create chronic illness and keep children out of school. That's a terrible statistic, and one which is going to lead to huge problems if we don't fix it. Patients with waterborne disease occupy about 50% of the hospital beds in Africa. And the World Health Organization reports that contaminated water contributes to 80% of all sickness and diseases worldwide. Now, when you get to rural Africa, it's not too difficult to see what the issue is. This is a very typical scene in Africa, and you can see the deposits left behind there. But this is right above a hill where the children gather their water from a hole after it rains. So I think you could imagine what goes down the hill. And there they are getting the water, and you can see the same deposits just in front of where, and it's raining. That particular day I was there, it was raining, and the children were gathering the water as the fecal matter ran into it. There's another very typical scene in Africa. Sometimes they're that close to the animals that you wonder what it is they're really taking back home to drink. Now, the amazing thing is these children walk for kilometers and kilometers to get their water. This particular day I went with these kids. We walked an hour and a half to get the water and an hour and a half back home. This container, the little boy in the front, weighs about 45 pounds or 20 kilograms. The little girl with the yellow one, I remember feeling sorry for her and taking the container and carrying it for about 200 meters and giving it back to her because I couldn't carry it. This is a very typical scene. Children carrying heavy water. Another one. And then there are some points of water for the children. The problem is they have to line up for hours to get them. So these boys waited at this particular site for, I think, about 2 hours to get their water. And the other thing I want you to notice is the quality of the containers they put it into. Sometimes if the water starts out coming out pristine, it doesn't end up that way after they get it in the containers. Now here's a typical scene in rural Africa where they do have a well. There's the lineup to get the water. That particular well got water, I think, at the rate of about 2 gallons per day. Those folks waited in line for a long, long time to get their water. Here's another one. This one was rather interesting to me. They drilled a well right beside the Nile River in the swamp, and it delivered swamp water. And I asked them how they liked it. They said they didn't know, they'd never drank it. So that was kind of a wasted effort. This little girl is getting water from what's called a government protected spring. And what I learned was that protected spring really doesn't mean protected spring, because when I asked them if the water flowed any higher when it rained, they said, of course. Well, that's not very protected. That water was very contaminated. That little girl was catching there with bacteria. Now, how bad is the water? Well, we test using E. coli, is our test organism, which is an indicator for fecal matter. And we use nice little test kits, test sheets now that I get from 3M. And it's basically a petri dish on a piece of paper. It's absolutely brilliant because now I can stick these in my pockets and walk around the jungle and do tests. So it's quite innovative. So there's some testing I was doing over there out behind the hotel. And you put the water on the test paper and you close it back up and you leave it to incubate. Now, if you left it for 24, 48 hours, that's the kind of test that you would get for the children water that is here, certainly in Elmville anyway. If there was one blue dot on that water, it would indicate one E. coli, and we would shut the water source down. Here's what the children in Africa are drinking the first test I did. Each one of those blue dots represents 100 E. coli. That's about 20,000 E. coli that those children are drinking. That was from that swamp you saw at the beginning there. Now, the World Health Organization has standards for drinking water, and they have acceptable, which of course is 0. They have low risk, it's about 10. Intermediate, I think it's 100. Very high, you can see it coming up. And then this is what the children in Africa are drinking, or rural Uganda. So you can see where they stand on the chart. Now, I went to a World Health Conference in June in Ghana, and the World Health Organization has determined that probably the best way we can attack this problem in those areas is with household water treatment. I want to talk specifically about SODIS. And SODIS is short for solar disinfection, and basically it uses the sun's ultraviolet or UV rays to disinfect drinking water. Now, that's not something that should be new to us here because a lot of people are using UV to disinfect their water, even as pristine as it is here. But we're using the solar rays of the sun. Now, I want to tell you, where did UV disinfection come from? I went to a talk at a university about a year ago, and there was a young man up there, about 18 years old, said he invented it. And I looked at him and I thought, gee, I don't think you're old enough. SODIS was invented by the creator of the universe, quite honestly. It's been here since the sun came up. It used by the Romans 2,000 years ago. That's what took place in a lot of the aqueducts. Fascinating reading if you want to do it sometime. But the father of modern day studies was a gentleman by the name of Professor Afton Akra at the University of Beirut in Lebanon in the early 80s. And he did some tremendous research on this technique. And it's been studied in detail for the past 20 years by a Swiss-funded group, Sandek Ewag, who coined the term SODIS. And please don't ask me to tell you what the acronyms are. I can never remember. How simple is it? Well, you fill disposable plastic bottles with water. Place the bottles on a hard surface, preferably a metallic surface like that, and I'll explain that to you in a moment. For one full sunny day, or 2 full cloudy days. And what happens is, in that 6 hours that it's in the sun, it goes from this to this. Now, I have to tell you, folks, the first time I did that, I didn't believe it. I thought maybe I'd tested my drinking water on the second one. So I repeated it. And I have to tell you that every time I ran this experiment that week, in one sunny day or 2 cloudy days, it went from that to that after a few hours in the sun. And this is how quickly it worked. You see the chart here. There's samples that went out at about 14,000, I think, at 10 o'clock in the morning. By noon hour, it was down to 2. By 2 o'clock, it was down to almost nothing, and by 6 o'clock, it was gone. And that happened every time that we ran the tests. We did do a little bit of experimentation, and I think in as much as I told you that this has been developed by a lot of different people, I think we've made some additions to it which have simplified it. But here's the bacteria and the viruses and the protozoa that are killed by this process. You can see cholera there. It kills typhoid, and it kills several viruses, cryptosporidium, giardia. It really is an effective process. Now, this is where I did my experimentation, and I know you're going to see those two satellite dishes there. And when I first stayed at this hotel, I thought I was really in luck. I'd have all kinds of television. One of those satellite dishes gets 24-hour-a-day soccer, and the other one gets 24-hour-a-day cricket. So I wasn't very much in luck. But here's part of the process that we did. We tried out galvanized metal versus just putting it on concrete or putting it on wood or laying it in the grass. And we found that we got about a 20% speed improvement by having it on the galvanized metal, which meant that the UV rays were going through the water and reflecting and coming back up. Another part of the experiment in the initial studies that were done, and when we went to other places that had tried this process, they had told them that they had to paint the bottles half black to absorb the heat. And there was an issue with the folks that were doing that because they had to find paint. They'd get the paint, they'd paint the bottles and dissolve the plastic, or they'd paint the bottles half black and turn the black side up. And so we decided to see if it made any difference. So I used a little bit of black material for putting around pipes. And so I ran it side by side with the black and without it, and it made no difference at all. So that got rid of that one. The other one that they were told to do was to fill the bottles about 2/3 full and then put the lid back on and shake them so they would oxygenate the water. Now that one made some sense to me, so I did want to try it. So we ran side by side several containers where we shook the water and containers where we didn't shake the water, and it made no difference. So what we were able to do was to take a process where they had to paint the bottles black, shake the bottles, and simply have a process where they could fill them full of water, lay them out in the sun, and get the job done. Now, where does this work? Well, it works 35 degrees either side of the equator where the UV rays of the sun are the strongest. That happens to take in the whole continent of Africa, and if you run that band around the world, it just happens to be the area where those 2 million children die every year. Now, we've been fortunate in that we have been able to just use the water and have it settle out and pour it into the containers, and it was clear enough to do the process. Because the process does require that the water be clear. If the UV rays can't see through the water, it can't kill the bacteria. So if you have cloudy water, it's not going to work. So in 99% of the cases, what we've had them do is just sit the water and the mud settles out, and then they just pour off the top and fill the bottles full of clear water. And this is about the worst that I've seen so far. But that water there, if you see on the right, that's what the water looked like when it came out of the pond, and there it is after it's set for 24 hours. And what we've taught the children is to put their hands behind the bottle, spread their fingers, and if they can count their fingers, then it's clear enough to put through the process. And that's about as simple as we can make it. So what we did was we took this concept, after we ran the experiments for a week and this is southwest Uganda, we ran the experiments, we decided to go and talk to the teachers, to the doctors, to the clinics, to the pastors of the churches, the educated level of the community. And we asked if they would give us a test case. We took 24 families, and the families had to have children that were constantly sick from diarrhea, dysentery, and stomach aches. They had to have 5 or more children, and they had to have no other source of water except the pond water. So we took those 24 families, we had the teachers teach the children at school, and then take them and teach them at home with a table like that. And within 2 to 3 weeks, those children started to get better. And within a month and a half, none of those children were sick. So we knew that we had something pretty good. So we set up more tables around the schools and around the homes. And then as we set up the tables at the homes and taught the children, something really interesting started to happen. The mothers saw the difference in the children. And I have to tell you, the mothers have become our strongest allies. And it makes a whole lot of sense because they're the ones that take care of the children when they're sick. And we've had mothers come to us and say, before I did this, I had to stay home and take care of my children, and now I can go out and work because they go to school. So there's an economic benefit to it as well. So the mothers have really been a great, and this woman is amazing. Her name is Grace, and she has taught literally the whole neighborhood how to do this process. And there's another lady with the tables. So essentially what we've tried to do is to change the culture through the children. We haven't gone in and taught it to the adult community, but rather went to the educated level and taught it to the children and had it taught through the school system. And I love this picture because someone had told me that we would never get children to drink out of water bottles. They wouldn't do it. Does this guy look like he was unhappy to drink out of a water bottle? So we had no problem with the children. They're just totally flexible, and they took to it very quickly. This is an interesting one because this is a widower that actually built his own stand. We didn't build this one for him. He went off. And this is something that's really interesting, folks. As we started to build these tables and teach this process, for every family that we helped, 2 families went out and did it on their own. So we had a level of sustainability. Now, just for those people that say you can't do enough bottles at a time, that's one of the schools that we're working at. You can do a lot of bottles. And the children really celebrate it. They really, really took to it. And of course, you know, the interesting thing was you could not like it because all of a sudden, for the first time in their life, they weren't sick. You know, what an amazing thing. And so we didn't have any problem getting the children on board. And they tell us, these children told us, we're not going back. There's some more children there. Now, what about the plastic leaching? Because this is something that comes up every time I give the talk. And it's one of the reasons I met Bill Shattuck in the first place about a year ago. Just as we're getting great results with this, it was just about the time that Bill's results were being put out about the antimony leaching from the PET bottles. Now, the first thing I have to tell you that there are millions and millions of PET bottles over there in Africa, the same as there are here. There's one company that we know in Nairobi, they make 250,000 a day of these bottles. So there's no shortage. The difference there is that there's a need for it. There's a genuine need for bottled water. That's all I can drink when I go over. I'm sure Maud will tell you the same thing. There's nothing drinkable out of the taps there. So there is a need, unlike here where it's a convenience that we seem to have adjusted to. And here we are. But I want to talk about plastic leaching because I called Bill Shattuck about a year ago and I said, Bill, I see your stuff starting to show up in the papers, and I have to tell you, I don't want to be curing one problem with these children and creating another one. So please tell me if there's an issue. And Bill was very kind. He just kind of smiled and he said, how long is it in the bottle? And I said, 2 days, 3 days. And he said, there's no issue. Because his work is based on long-term leaching of the plastic into the water. So if it's several months or several weeks, so 2 or 3 days, these kids put the water in the bottles and they rotate them. They put them out for a day or 2 and they have another set come out while they consume the other ones. So leaching in this particular case is not an issue. And I think even for whatever minute quantities are there, it's a whole lot better than 30,000 E. coli that they've been drinking and it's been killing them all these years. Now, what do you do with the used bottles? That's another one that comes up, and it's a fair question because we've got to the place now where in that community of 24, there are now close to 50,000 people doing this process. So we have been able to gather bottles from the local community, from the hotels and whatever, up and until this really started to grow. Now we buy them and we bring them in 6,000 at a time. But the bottles get about 40 to 80 uses. So unlike here where we drink it and then throw it in the garbage can, they can use them 40 to 80 times. And when they're not usable anymore is when they get scratched, when the surface gets scratched, and then they become white or opaque and UV rays can't penetrate through. So at that point, they put the bottles away and use new ones. That's anywhere for them 8 months to a year. So they're getting about 8 months to a year out of a single bottle. Now, we do want to make sure that we don't pollute the environment with the bottles. And these folks have come up with some really innovative things. And I got to tell you, this is not my idea. This is theirs. I want to show you this. There's a little girl with a bottle that's well used. That's actually in Kenya. So what do? They take these bottles and they fill them full of water. They turn them upside down, put a hole in the top of the bottle. They put them in where the saplings are, and they use them to irrigate the roots of the saplings. There's a whole project in Kenya that has done thousands and thousands of little trees, and this is the way they irrigate them, using the bottles that way. So there's a wonderful use for bottles over in Kenya. And finally, where there's not a use for them in this particular area, we are teaching them recycling. So we've set up recycling depots in the areas where we have the biggest use, and we tell them to bring all their plastic and bring it back to a dump and hang on to it. And what we do is have them sort the plastic and then take it back for recycling. So we have got a couple of ways of dealing with the, it's not perfect, but I think we've got them thinking. Now, what are the advantages of this process? Well, first of all, it's easy to use, it's easy to teach, it's low cost, it's no maintenance. You know, part of the frustration I had when we looked at other systems was there was always something, make sure that you back flush, make sure that you do this, make sure that you do that. And you know what, folks? In this part of the world, they don't do it. I went into an area where there were 20 wells that had not worked for 2 years, and the children were dying because they didn't have any water, because nobody showed them how to fix the pumps on the wells. So anytime you can get into a situation here where there's no maintenance, you've got a chance of doing something. So there's no maintenance. It uses 100% local resources. Those bottles are as plentiful there as they are here. They've got the wood, they've got the metal, they can build their own tables. So for us, it's an education program. If we can educate them and leave that education behind, then we can walk away and they don't need us anymore. And to me, that's sustainability. It doesn't change the taste of the water. If you chlorinate the water, if you boil the water, it changes the taste. They don't like that. The nice thing about this is it doesn't make it taste any better, but it doesn't change the taste of it, and they like that. It uses the sun. I had this debate with somebody a while ago. They said, this is not sustainable. And I said, why do you say that? And they said, because you're using bottles. I said, the bottle's the vehicle. The sun's the most sustainable resource that we've got on this planet. And we've got to start using more of it, quite frankly, for other things too. And the other thing that's really neat about this, there's no chance of recontamination. So what other system you do, you saw the containers that they keep that water in. Even if they get pure water, even if they boil the water and they put it into those containers are full of bacteria. So they wind up pouring that water back into a drinking cup, and they still get bacteria. This is the last step before they drink, and there's no chance of recontamination. So that's the other reason we like it. Here's a statement from the World Health Organization. Because of the simplicity, low cost, and the need for only beverage bottles and sunlight, solar disinfection is an appropriate technology for disinfection of household water in the developing world. And another statement that I really like, and this was from Kevin Watkins' report 2 years ago, the most effective vaccine against child death in Africa is a clean glass of water. Now, just quickly to show you where our work has been, whoops, so far, what did I do? Oh, I guess I pressed, oh, I know, I pressed, how do I get it back? Oh, sorry. Okay. That's what I was looking for. This is the area that we've been working on here in southwest Uganda, just above Rwanda, and right beside the Democratic Republic of Congo. So the major work's been going on here. We're doing a lot of work now up in this area, up in the Albert Nile region. And we're starting another large project when I go back in November in this area. And this is the next target area up in Soroti. So we're trying to get point of references right across Uganda. We're also now working on projects in Western Kenya and also in the Maasai area. Just to show you that this is really starting to catch on worldwide, there's the worldwide numbers. We've done our little bit in Africa, in Kenya and Uganda. We've maybe done 50, 60,000, but in Africa total there's 344,000 doing it in these areas. In Asia, close to 1.5 million, and in Latin America about 360,000. And I've done some work with the folks in Latin America recently, and I think this number will go up substantially. So here's the Cheers to Clean Water. And I love this picture. It's my favorite picture of all of them, because some of these children are the children that were back in that original picture in the swamp, and some of them were not even going to school, but this picture's about 3 years old. Some of these kids have graduated from school and they're in high school now. And I ask people to look at these faces and tell me if you think these children will let their children die of bad water. There's another one. There's a school that we're doing in Kenya right now in the Maasai area. We have no problem with the kids. They're just amazing. There's some more. So I think in closing, folks, what I'd like to say to you is this. 2 million children in this world, on this planet, die every year because they can't get a simple glass of clean drinking water. 2 million. And I don't care what language, I don't care what nationality or what religion, I think that's wrong. I think that's a terrible, terrible injustice, especially when a lot of them go and carry that water for 3 or 4 hours to take it back home and drink and get sick and die. So we looked at this and tried to break it down into a cost structure. And you know what? For $50, we can get a table, the training, and all the bottles for a family of 5. And that changes their life forever, just to put it in perspective for you. And I think for me, I don't think that we can leave this, like Maud talked to you about other problems today, I don't think we can leave these problems to our grandchildren. I think these are problems that we've got to solve today. I don't want to leave this. I've got 5 grandkids. I'm not leaving this problem for them. We've got to do it ourselves. So I thank you very much. As